Hello, welcome back to another recipe. So today, as part of like a Christmas sort of dessert, I wanted to make a coffee cake with a honeycomb crunchy topping. So we're going to start off with 175 grams of sifted flour. You want to sift the flour just so the cake is really nice and light. I'm just going to do it in small amounts at first. Along with the flour, we're going to add 150 grams of caster sugar. And we're going to sift that through as well. And finally, we're going to add half a teaspoon of salt. We're going to set this aside, and then we're going to separate 6 eggs. We're going to start with the egg yolk in here. I like to crack my egg on a flat surface just to prevent the shell getting pulled into there. And we're going to start with the egg whites in a larger bowl because you'll be whipping these up, and then separate the egg yolk into a separate bowl. Make sure you don't get any of that egg yolk into your egg whites, otherwise it won't whip up. I've separated my eggs so the egg whites are here, the egg yolks are here. And now I'm going to measure 50 grams of caster sugar into the eggs. You don't have to sift this. And now we're going to whisk these just until they're combined and a little creamy. When the sugar and egg yolks are combined, add 60 millilitres of cold water. And then you're going to whisk for a further 45 minutes until they're really creamy and they're thickened. With some assistance from my sister, we have some lovely creamy thickened egg yolks. They should sort of jiggle a little bit. And now we're going to whisk up our egg whites until they're really, until they've formed stiff peaks. You want to make sure you're using a whisk that's clean, there's no egg yolks on it, otherwise this won't whip up. When your egg whites are frothy, we're going to add a teaspoon of cream of tartar, sprinkle that in and continue whisking until they form stiff peaks. You might be able to hear my cat complaining. When we've reached soft peak stage, as you see the whites just starting to peak, we're going to stream in around 100 grams of caster sugar, just a little at a time, and continue whisking. When you've reached beautiful, stiff, glossy peaks, we're going to add the last parts to the egg whites. So I've zested a full lemon. We're not including the white. You don't want to include any of that rind in there, otherwise you're going to end up with very bitter lemon zest. We're going to add the lemon zest in there. And then we're going to squeeze a tablespoon of this. So we've added our lemon zest, and I'm going to squeeze a tablespoon of lemon. Just pick out the seeds as you see them. And we're going to add the lemon juice. And a teaspoon of vanilla extract. Do use vanilla extract, not essence, otherwise it's going to be kind of bitter. I find extract just tastes a lot better. And then we're going to whisk to combine this. When you've combined the egg white mixture, we're going to add the egg yolk mixture that we mixed up earlier. I'm going to add all of it. And then we're going to fold this in very gently because you don't want to knock all of that air that you've just made out of this mixture. You want a nice fluffy cake. And just mix it in until it's combined. When you have combined your egg white and yolk mixture, add a third of your flour and sugar mixture at a time and fold it in using the same method as you did before, just until combined, and then do it again until you've added all of your flour. We're going to add the last third of the flour mixture, fold it in, and your batter is ready. So the mixture is ready, and we're going to add it to our baking tin. I'm having to use an old pot, unfortunately, but of course just use your own baking tins, and this is around 23 centimeters in diameter. I'm going to add it all. I like to just smooth the surface of the cake out. And then you can also pat it on the table a little bit, but I won't do that too much. Give it a shake. And any drips on the side, you can get rid of that to prevent it burning. And this is ready to go into a preheated 160 degree fan oven. If you're using gas, heat it to 180 degrees, and it's going to go in the bottom 2/3 of the oven because you want it to cook evenly, not too quickly. This is going to bake for around 50 minutes, and then I'll check on it and see if it's done by that point, and if not, give it extra time as needed, but we don't want to dry this cake out. There's 10 to 15 minutes left to go on this. Hope you can see, but it's rising really nicely. The cake is done. I'm ready to take it out now. I'm going to check if it's done by just inserting a skewer into the middle. If it comes out clean, you know it's done, and we're going to let this cool. Flipped the cake out onto a wire rack to cool, and I'm just going to peel off the parchment paper. I find this really satisfying. Yes. And we're going to let this cool completely before we think about decorating this, because you don't want the icing to melt. And you can see it's spongy, it springs back nicely. So we're going to start making the coffee crunch honeycomb topping, and we're going to start with 250 grams of caster sugar. I've made 60 millilitres of coffee here. I didn't have any espresso, so I just used 3 teaspoons of this with 60 millilitres of hot water. And we're going to add this to the sugar that we measured earlier. And finally, we're going to add 4 tablespoons of golden syrup. I'm using Lyle's golden syrup. I feel like this is the brand I really like. Ooh, I love that look. We're just going to add it to the pan. 4 tablespoons of this, and we're going to stir it. Now turn this sugar coffee mixture, put it on the gas on a low heat, and keep stirring just until the sugar has dissolved into it. When the sugar has dissolved into the mixture, turn the heat up to a higher setting. You're going to cook this until it reaches 145 degrees Celsius, and then you're going to add in your bicarbonate of soda. Don't be tempted to stir it. This could cause the sugar to crystallise, and you don't want big chunks of sugar in there. Just leave it to its own devices. So we've reached 145 degrees. We're going to take it off the heat and add our bicarbonate of soda. Careful when you add it, it's going to foam up quite a lot, so I'm going to add mine in little additions. I'm adding a tablespoon of bicarbonate of soda. It's going to foam up massively like this, and we're going to pour it out onto a baking sheet. I've poured out the honeycomb crunch mixture onto a baking sheet on a baking tray. Just be careful, don't be tempted to touch it. It is going to be extremely hot, and you're going to let this cool completely. We're now going to prepare the coffee frosting for the cake. So I'm starting with 2 teaspoons of instant coffee, the same I used before, and I'm going to add around a tablespoon or 2 of caster sugar or icing sugar. I've measured out 500 millilitres of double cream. I'm just going to add a small splash, just a little, and I'm going to mix this until it's fully dissolved, and then we're going to add the rest. When your coffee and sugar has dissolved into your cream, add 2 teaspoons of vanilla extract, 2 teaspoons, and the rest of your cream. Altogether, you should have 500 millilitres of double cream. If you feel like it's not sweet enough or the coffee isn't strong enough for your liking, you can always add more. And then you can blend this up with either a hand mixer or just a whisk until it's nice and thick. I've whipped up the coffee cream. It should be at a thick consistency, but you don't want it to be so thick where it turns to buttercream. I prepared my cake the day before because my mum was making a big turkey, and I didn't want to be using the oven thing with all the roasties in there. So Cling film is also a really good way to keep your cakes moist and help them stop drying out if you want to make it ahead of time. And what we're going to do is we're going to cut this cake into thirds. So we're going to cut horizontally with a bread knife until it's in 3 pieces. I was watching Beauty and the Beast with my family, so I voiced over this next section. So I cut the cake into 3 using a bread knife and spread out a third of that coffee cream mixture onto the base of the cake. Then I repeated this with another third of the cake with the second section of the cake. It doesn't have to look perfect at this point because you're not going to see these sections, just get it evenly spread. And then repeat the same process with the last third of that coffee cream on the final section of that cake. Spread it around the edges of the cake too. You want to taste that coffee cream throughout. You want it to be nice and sweet and rich. At this point you can also use a knife to spread out the cream evenly, really smooth out those edges. We're going to prepare it for the honeycomb topping. So we're going to crack that up and it should be completely cooled by this point. And then scatter it over your cake. Do this right before you serve, otherwise the honeycomb will melt into your cake and it will end up with a sort of disaster. And again, your cake is ready. You can scatter the honeycomb around the edges of the cake too, but I preferred it just on the top to prevent it becoming overpowering. One recommendation is that to add less coffee to the honeycomb in future. I found it just a tad too bitter towards the end. Otherwise, I thought this cake was brilliant. It was light and fluffy, which was great after a heavy roast. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed the recipe. If you did, please do show your support by leaving a like, subscribing, clicking that notification bell. It's always appreciated. And have a lovely new year.